Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Cubs battle to try to get back to first place. We're talking White Sox. We're talking Bears' second preseason game and more. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You can see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season is less than 2 months away, so make sure you head on over to icehogs.com, get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, how are you doing today?
I am doing okay. Like you, just got back from Wrigley Field from the Cubs game, and it was nice to see a series win. And like you were saying before this show, we were both thankful to be in the shade because it was a warm one, and it's only going to get warmer around here. But the Cubs do go on the road. But yeah, it was one of those things where when you're in the shade, you feel perfectly fine. But then, like, if you're just walking around outside the park to get in, it's like you're in an oven.
Yeah, it was wild
today.
So my mother-in-law and I were walking out, and we went from shaded area to outside, and we were in the shade in Gallagher Way. And then once we got on to Clark, that's when the sun hit. I was like, whoa! It was like stepping into an oven.
Yeah, and we've had amazing weather recently, like really, really amazing weather. And it's like, well, it was going to get hot, and then you kind of feel it, and you're like, all right, well, I kind of didn't miss this, but at least the fact that it wasn't raining or storming or anything, and we were able to, play a game under the sun, you take that at least, because, with the remaining schedule in the baseball season and the fact that the Cubs have used up like 3 of their off days in the past week and they're not going to get many going forward, you really want to not have to play a lot of double headers. So take the sun during games while you can.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the way their starting pitching is going, they need that bullpen, and having double headers is tough.
Yeah, and if I saw correctly, it's not like they're going to be getting a whole lot of time off down the stretch here.
I didn't look at the full schedule, but last I saw, yeah, they're not getting too many days off.
Yeah, that's rough. But that's just how it goes. You got to weather the storm, and a lot of teams are in the same boat.
All right. Should we start with talking more Cubs, or where do you want to start?
Yeah, why don't we start with baseball?
Yeah, so we talked about with this stretch of games the Cubs had, that this 12-game stretch, like the worst case scenario, they have to go 8-4. And we're like 5 games in, and they're 3-2. So that's not a good start. Splitting with the White Sox, winning with not sweeping the Royals. That's tough. They've got to pick up this pace a little bit, because I was expecting the Brewers to fare worse against the Rangers than they are, and we're not gaining ground here.
Well, I'll tell you, during this stretch, obviously you're not going to win every single game, but Friday's loss against the Royals was really frustrating. Really, really frustrating. It looked like they were kind of sleepwalking the whole way. And you had an early lead. You were down and then you had an early lead because you rallied early on and you're up 3-2, and then you did nothing. You did nothing since then. And you saw several runs score after some bad first baseman play by Patrick Wisdom. And that was on multiple occasions. There were several errors made over at first base. Wisdom was playing there, and those cost you essentially 2 runs because the second error was followed by a Bobby Witt go-ahead homer. And you would think that even with that, you'd be able to score off the bullpen, but they didn't. And I mean, frankly, they did not dominate this series whatsoever. And winning the series, you won the series. That's the important thing. That's good. But I mean, look at today's game. It came down to the wire against the Royals.
I mean, after the first inning, we, I was like, okay, I feel comfortable. We were up 2-1, and then got the insurance run from the Suzuki home run, and then Amaya's home run, and then you're like, okay, all right, I'm feeling comfortable. Ninth inning, Alzolay, and they needed all 4 of those runs.
Yeah, I mean, that Amaya home run ended up being the game winner.
Yeah, it was. And, is on the stat sheet, if you look, Hendricks pitched a pretty good game, but he got himself into some spots there, and they were hitting him pretty good.
Got a couple of line outs to Hap's glove and Suzuki's glove. Definitely got some help from the defense.
Yeah, got a few deep fly balls. And it was, it was not a great game. I mean, stat wise, it was fine, but it was not a great game for Hendricks. And
I mean, the nice thing is he was able to get a little bit of fortune because he hasn't gotten that lately.
No, he hasn't. And the Cubs hitters, they seem to be able to square up on the Royal starter. They just it was so many hard hit outs, and it was so frustrating. Like it wasn't like, I mean, they should have capitalized more on a guy with a 6.5 ERA, but they were hitting him square. It just, it doesn't matter how hard you hit it. It's where you hit it, and they hit it directly at people.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like though the middle innings, they were just kind of hacking and hitting pop-ups and grounders, but there were definitely a number of occasions where you were like, okay, you hit it well, but it was right at somebody. I mean, the first inning, every out and hit was squared up big time. Like Talkman lined out. That was a rocket. And
I mean, that was to set the tone for the game. Like first batter, rocket. And then after that, there was a lot of those, and just couldn't aim them a couple feet over, but they did enough to win.
It does feel like, in a way, that part of it is maybe a little bit of the evening out of the BABIP luck, so to speak, because when they were on that just unbelievable tear a few weeks ago, everything the Cubs were putting in play was finding grass. I mean, like everything. So maybe you just say, okay, maybe it's just a tad of regression and things will be fine. And I think they will be. So like today you got 5 hits in 8 innings against Jordan Lyle and 4 runs. I mean, you won the game, so fine. I think what stood out more though was the first 2 games of the series. Because like there was no real misfortune in game 1 of the series. They just flat out did not hit.
Right. Yeah, game 1 of that series. Like, I mean, it sucked because Tyone didn't pitch terribly. Didn't pitch great, but didn't pitch terribly. Just the defense didn't help him out, and the offense didn't help him out. The second game that we did win, we needed it sucks that we had to take a Justin Steele start to get a win in that Kansas City series.
Well,
But
the thing about that game too was they scored those runs early on. Bellinger hit the home runs. You're up 6-1. You're thinking, okay, this will be a cakewalk. But then the bats went asleep, and the Royals. Listen, credit the Royals this series. They did not give up. They played hard. Even in today's game, that team did not give up because there were kind of times during this series where the Cubs just kind of looked like they were on autopilot, so to speak.
I'm going to say this is the Royals got some nice players.
Bobby Witt's
Bobby
legit.
Witt, yeah, their catcher's legit. Um, they've got some nice players. Bobby Witt is really good. I remember, growing up, I, it's funny, like a lot of my baseball knowledge when I was little, because we didn't have cable, and we only really got the Cubs games on TV. So if the Cubs weren't playing a team, I didn't know a lot about them. I learned a lot from baseball cards. I was a big baseball card kid, and I read the back and read the stats. And when and then when saw Bobby Witt Jr. For the first time, not this weekend, but the first time I saw him, I was like, I've got his dad's baseball card.
Nah.
And I said the same thing with Mark Leiter Jr. I'm like, I've got his dad and his uncle's baseball card.
No,
And
there you go.
it's fun. It's fun now that I'm older to see these players that I watched their dads and their uncles and their grandpas play, um, and then be able to watch them, and it seems like a lot more that there's that lineage is helpful to players, and you're seeing so many players like Bo Bichette and um Guerrero, and there's so many players that are kids of players that were good when I was a kid, and just seeing that, and that's neat. That's a
Yeah,
neat
it's not
thing to
just the
see.
Griffies and the Alus anymore.
Yeah, they'll lose, man. There was that they were just a powerhouse family.
Man, how many Alus played in the majors? At least four, right?
Felipe, Moises, there's got to be at least four.
Because Felipe was Moises's father, and there were two other Alus siblings, at least two other siblings, I believe, that played. Matty Alu, wasn't he one of them?
Let's see. There was Felipe Alou. I think his brother played. Um,
Yes.
Moises. Uh, there was God. Who were the other Alous?
At family reunions, they pee on their hands.
Ha. Um. Jeez. Matty Alou.
Yep.
His cousin, Moises's cousin played baseball too. Mel Rojas.
Oh, that's his cousin?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Um, and his half brother was the manager of the Mets for a couple years, Luis Rojas.
Huh. Man, that family is something.
Yeah, then there's the Bonds, Barry and Bobby.
Oh, there's Jesus Alu. That was the
Yeah,
other
okay, yeah,
that was the
Jesus
other
Alou.
Felipe um sibling.
Yeah, I remember like when I was a kid when Ken Griffey Jr. first came up, I was like, his dad, his dad was like one of the older players when I first got into baseball cards, and I was like, oh, I was like, that's Ken Griffey's son. I was so excited to get that baseball card. And then, he turned out to be a far superior player to his dad. And that's not a knock on his dad. His dad was a very good baseball player, but Ken Griffey was
I mean,
was
he's
great.
yeah. I mean, Ken Griffey's arguably like the most complete position player of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's funny, like when you live through an era, it's so much different to define a player by his stats than when you watched him. Like, a lot of people just forget about Frank Thomas now, and he was like the most feared hitter in baseball for a while.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And Ken Griffey was just that was the dude. He was, we talked about him like people talk about Shohei Ohtani right now. It was not in the same manner, but like in the same hyperbole. Like he's the face of baseball. He's this guy that, is the best player, and you want him on your team, and and the White Sox got that way too late.
Yeah.
But
You know,
yeah,
it's just funny going to the Alou thing just really quick. His Moises's career numbers. Have you ever looked at them?
mm-mm.
They're really good. Like, listen, his career slash line is 303, 369, 516, career OPS of 885, and 332 home runs. That's a really good ball player right there.
Wow.
Yeah, he was that
Seriously?
good. Yeah.
Huh. And he
Career
played.
OPS plus a 128.
Wow. Hmm. That's wild.
Yeah. He missed 2 years due to injury, 1991 and 1999. You think if he plays those 2 seasons, he wouldn't have quite 400 home runs, but he'd be closer. Because he'd hit between like 20 to 30 a year. So let's say he hit, just give him 40 more career homers. That's over 350 homers. But 332 still ain't shabby.
No, that's a great career. Never would have thought that.
Yeah, 6-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger, World Series champion with the Marlins in 97. He was the second overall pick by the Pirates.
Yeah, he was a Pirate initially, yeah.
And they trade him right away? Yeah, sent
Yeah.
Moises Alou to the Expos.
Yeah, he went to the Expos, and that's where he really blossomed.
Why'd they trade him?
I don't remember.
Oh,
that.
the Pirates are a dumb organization, so.
Yeah. Um,
Good old wee hands.
I mean, look at that career K rate, 11%.
Really damn good.
3-0. Wow.
If he wasn't injured those 2 years and maybe his initial career got off to a slightly quicker start, you may be looking at a Hall of Fame case.
Yeah, you know what the thing is he just never got that notoriety. Like he was always a good
No.
player, but he never got that notoriety. And I think sometimes that hype is what differentiates between two players.
He was always kind of a complimentary piece and not like an MVP piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like you didn't build around him, but he was a solid addition.
Like Moises Alou was number 2 to Sosa here in Chicago.
Yeah, I look at him like oh my God, what is the guy that we got from the Pirates that played third base? Aramis Ramirez. Like a player like that. Really good player and helped make this team better, but he wasn't the focus. He wasn't the man.
So, in terms of Fangraphs, 47.7 career F4. Here's what killed him. Not kill, but he was never the best defender.
There's a very famous incident, as you may recall.
Well, yes. Yeah. But it's funny you mention that because I remember Steve Stone in an interview in one of the documentaries about that thing that happened 20 years ago this year. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I know Moises Alou is not going to be winning many gold gloves. I don't think he has any on his shelf, but he really should be able to make that catch. That's kind of Moises Alou as a player. You never thought of him as a defender in the outfield. He was in left field. Nobody really cared about left field defense, so he was always just an offensive player, a 129 career WRC plus, and it was one of those things where he was really just purely a hitter and like at best serviceable in the outfield. If he had an above average glove, I think he would have a bigger Hall of Fame case.
Oh yeah. And I'm looking at Ramos Ramirez, career 386 home runs, career slash line of 283, 341, 492. And wound up with over 2,300 hits.
Well, and he was you made a really good comparison with him and Alou, because it's like he's not your MVP, but he's an important part of your team. He comes up big, and neither were known for Aramis Ramirez was never known for his third base defense. But you kind of let it slide because he was always hitting. It didn't really it wasn't bad enough to be like this is a liability, but it was never Gold Glove caliber.
Well, you didn't have DH, so where was he going to go? Like that was
right.
He was a one position guy.
He did right, and he did enough to just be at best serviceable, basically at third base.
Yeah, he was, I would say, average.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe slightly below average.
This is all relevant because this is the 20th anniversary of the 03 Cubs.
It is. It really is.
And I'm looking at their Fangraphs page now. Okay, before we get back to modern Cubs, you want to play a little guessing game here?
On the 03 Cubs?
Yes, I got some stats. Play a little stat guessing game.
All right, let's go.
Okay. First of all, who was the F-WAR leader on the 03 Cubs?
Position player or ever anybody?
Total. The number one guy.
Carlos Zambrano.
No.
Sosa?
Nope.
Moises Alou?
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct. A 3.4 F-WAR for Moises Alou in 151 games played. Sosa was second with 2.8. Okay, so now let's do WRC plus. Leader for qualified position players.
Qualifying. Is it going to be somebody that surprises me?
No.
Oh, okay. Ramos Ramirez.
Nope.
Moises Alou?
Nope.
Sosa.
That's right. 131.
Okay.
All right.
Thought you were gonna at first when I asked surprise, I'm like, is it gonna be like Corey Patterson?
Corey Patterson. So I haven't filtered out exactly qualified here, but number one was technically Sergio Mitre, but that's because he had like one hit and 3 at-bats that entire year. So, and then Trenton Hubbard had played in like 10 games. But in terms of guys that played at least 50 games, you had Sosa 1, Kenny Lofton 2 with 121. So Kenny Lofton was really, really valuable for the Cubs that year.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's another interesting guess. Who was the leader in OBP that year in terms of guys who played at least 50 games? Because I'm trying to make a point here with this one.
This one's gonna be so on base percentage.
And I didn't mean to say at least 50. I mean at least 100 games.
Kenny Lofton?
No, he played 56. If it would have been at least 50
Oh, okay.
games, it would have been Kenny Lofton. At least 100 games. That's
Oh, at
my
least
fault. I meant
100. All
at least
right.
100 games. Yeah,
Um, on base percentage, at least 100 games. Mark Grudzelanek?
that's right. 366. He batted 314 that year.
Okay.
He was kind of I don't want to make the full comparison, but he kind of was like Nico Horner in a way. I think that Grudzelanek got on base a little more than Nico Horner, but higher average, low power. I think Nico has a little more pop because Grudzelanek only hit 3, but I
Yeah,
think Grudzelanek
yeah, he had no pop.
no. So I think Horner has at least a little bit, and Grudzelanek hit for a bit of a higher average. So, but it's kind of that same concept. Here's your second baseman, not known for power, more for contact line drive, but like a 100-ish WRC plus. Okay, now here's a name that I'm sure you remember. You remember Hee-Seop Choi?
Yep, first baseman.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember how many games he played in that year?
I'm gonna guess he played roughly half the season, so I'm gonna guess 81.
80. You were off by 1. That is an excellent guess. That is like really, really, really freaking spot on. Good job. Because wasn't it the game where he bumped into Kerry Wood and he was knocked out cold against the Yankees? I think that was his last game of the year.
Might have been.
Because then they got Randall Simon to platoon with
Eric
Karros. Yeah. And that's the other funny thing, too, that people sometimes forget. They think, oh, 03 wasn't Derek Lee. No, he was on the Marlins.
Yeah, he was on the Marlins that year.
And he broke our backs in games 6 and 7 that year.
Yep.
Hey. Okay, let's do one more here. Okay. And there was something with Fangraphs. So when I asked about the original, the F4 leader, that was my mistake. That was just position players.
Okay.
So, because I knew something wasn't right. Because do you know, now that I have in front of me, the overall F4 leader on the 03 Cubs, you could probably guess.
Mark Pryor?
7.8.
He had a real good year that year.
Because that was his O WAR I was looking at. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't right. So yeah, the Moises Alou was the leader in position F WAR, while total F WAR is Mark Pryor, 7.8. Carlos Zambrano was 4.7. Kerry Wood was 4.2. Matt Clement was 2.9. So your top 3 most valuable guys were
who was
pitchers.
The 5th starter that year? Was it Sean Estes?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I was hoping that they would organize WAR by total team, but you have to click on batting and pitching for this archive. So we are just seeing batting WAR for Mark Pryor. So yeah, I knew something wasn't right there, but a 2.43 ERA, 2.47 FIP, a 2.92 xFIP. You had a 10.4 K per 9 and a 7.8 F4 for Mark Pryor. That is unreal.
I want to say that year, Zambrano pitched over 30 games and only gave up single-digit home runs, if I remember correctly, like 7 or 8 home runs.
Let's see here.
In like 30 starts.
9 home runs in 32 starts.
Yeah, I remember that's incredible because Mark Pryor, he gave up, not a ton of home runs, but he gave up, home runs and Zambrano just he was stingy with giving up home runs.
Yeah, that year he was, and Zambrano pitched more innings than any other starter on the team. And no pitcher pitched more innings than Carlos Zambrano that year.
And I bet, it's funny to think about is I bet the Cubs had at least 3 pitchers over 200 innings.
4.
Clement got over 4 or over 200.
Yep.
Okay, I know Estes didn't.
No, he had 152.
Yeah, but it's wild to think about 4 pitchers with over 200 innings.
And Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor both pitched a 211 innings. Mark Pryor just happened to pitch 1/3 of an inning more. So your top 4 guys in terms of innings pitched: Zambrano 214, Mark Pryor 211.1, Kerry Wood 211, Matt Clement 201.2. You don't see that anymore.
No.
You do not see that at all, which to me is just bonkers.
That's wild. I wouldn't have guessed Matt Clement had over 200, but the other 3, yeah, that's insane.
Well, because Zambrano started 32 games, Pryor 30, Kerry Wood 32, Matt Clement 32, Sean Estes appeared in 29 games, started 28 of them. And here's the last trivia question for you. Who are the other pitchers to start games for the Cubs that year? There's 2.
I know Sergio Mitre started at least 1 game.
2.
I couldn't tell you who else.
Juan Cruz.
I never would have guessed that. I just remembered. Yeah, I remember that Sergio Mitre had at least started 1 game, and I was like, I don't know why that was stuck in my head.
He's an awful person. Did you hear about that stuff?
No.
I don't even want to say it on this show, but if you're inclined to find out, and I'd really risk you looking, like I truly do. If you look up Sergio Mitre, you're going to be horrified.
Oh my God. I bet if you look at last year's Cubs, I would put $50 down that says nobody had 150 innings pitched. That nobody had as many innings pitched as Sean Estes did in 2003.
Let's take a look, Shelly. I believe you're right. Because, yeah, I don't think anybody. Because what? Marcus Stroman didn't pitch 200 innings.
No, I
last
bet.
year.
But I bet nobody even had over 150.
Let's see who the leader was, because I honestly don't remember. I don't know if it was Steele or because
Stroman probably led it. I'm gonna guess Keegan Thompson second, Justin Steele third, if I'm guessing. But I bet like the Stroman probably had like 150, 140 innings, something like that.
Stroman led the way with 138. And you remember he missed a few starts because he had that injury.
Yeah.
And then Justin Steele is second with 119.
Zambrano had almost 100 more innings pitched.
Yeah. Keegan Thompson, 115. Drew Smiley, 106 and a third. Adrian Sampson, 104 and a third. Man, I forgot about him. And then Kyle Hendricks because he got hurt midway through.
Yeah.
Yeah, times have changed. They've really, really changed. You don't really see many 200 inning pitchers anymore, period. Back then, it was just like, listen, you could have given up 3 or 4 runs, but you're still probably pitching into the 7th inning.
What the? Oh my God. I just Googled Sergio Mitre.
Yeah. Pretty screwed up.
Why?
I always hated him. He was an awful pitcher.
Like, why? Oh my God.
It's like I said, you don't even want to repeat it on this show.
I don't even want to repeat the first incident.
No.
It was in the Mexican League. Like, oh my God, what?
40 to 60 years. That's not enough.
Jesus Christ. Wow. What a terrible, terrible person.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, I'm going to go out and say that Alex is absolutely correct. Don't Google it.
It's
Just,
that bad.
it's, oof, oof. That's brutal.
I knew I had
Oof.
a reason for hating him as a kid, in addition to him just being a garbage pitcher.
Well, I'm gonna change subjects here, and I'm gonna ask you a question.
Okay.
If you are Jed and you have the money to re-sign one player from this team, one player of the two, Jamer Candelaria or Cody Bellinger?
Cody Bellinger.
Okay, I agree. And more so because he's a better defender and a more versatile defender. I think that really throws it over the top for me.
Well, and I think too, just his track record. Like Jamer Candelario, when he's healthy, is a very solid ball player, but when you have a healthy Cody Bellinger, he's been an MVP before.
And
He's multi-time All-Star MVP, World Series champion. It's just you have a higher ceiling.
do you think the Cubs will sign either one?
Yes, but I'm scared that it's not going to be Cody Bellinger.
I'm scared that Cody Bellinger has priced himself out of Chicago.
Which is crazy because when you think about it, there's not going to be a whole lot of teams that are going to be able to pay that price, or at least willing to pay that price. But I also think you're right.
Because he's gonna want a multi-year deal and really good money, and he deserves it.
Well, you know what I think is going to happen? You know what I could totally see happening? In a desperation to get back on track, the Yankees are just going to shell whatever he wants for him.
I don't be surprised. I mean, that team is in shambles right now.
That's putting it lightly. I mean, that team's a mess, and they need. Could you imagine Cody Bellinger playing 81 games at that ballpark with that short porch, with that lefty swing?
Oh yeah. And the thing is I love watching when the Yankees make high price uh signings and they fail.
A lot of them, I mean, Garrett Cole has worked, but do you remember when they signed Jacoby Ellsbury way back when?
Yeah.
That was that was bad. That was really bad. And frankly, the whole Carlos Rodon thing doesn't look like a fruitful investment either.
No, it doesn't. And I will tell you though that I know a lot of Yankees fans because I lived on the East Coast for a long time. They're not big fans of Garrett Cole because you look at him not just blindly on the stats. You look at him as the contract with the stats and the expectations that came along with him.
And I feel like one of the issues with Garrett Cole too is that he's kind of built this reputation of doesn't necessarily pitch well in the crucial games,
Mm-hmm.
if you know what I mean.
Yep. I mean, he's 10-4 with a 3.03 ERA. Like that's like the numbers are fine. It's just
The numbers on the surface are great, but
but the contract they gave him and the expectations that they had where he would lead them versus what he has are just don't mesh. And um and it's not a complete disaster like if they would have signed Trevor Bauer, but
right.
it's they're not happy with it. And the Rodon signing is is not working out.
Yeah, and I legit don't know how much physically Rodon has left in the tank.
I'm not going to go that far, but
The injuries, man, those have piled up.
they have piled up.
I mean, it's a concern, right?
Oh, absolutely. He peaked at the right time.
Could you imagine though if because that he had a really good year with the Giants last year. Could you imagine if the Giants just got a haul for him at the deadline?
What was that?
Well, he was with the Giants last year. Could you
Yeah.
imagine if they traded him and got a haul for him
Oh, yeah, that would have been wild.
instead of, the opt out? The other funny thing too is I was actually a big advocate of bring Carlos Rodon to the north side, but kind of glad we didn't do that.
I thought his injury history would be behind him, and I'm glad that we didn't bring him in.
Me too. Because it's crept its way back.
Um, I wish him well, but uh, he's having a rough go.
Yeah, he is.
Um, yeah, so the next batch of games we got this week, we got 3 in Detroit, 3 in Pittsburgh. We already have the announcement of who the projected starters are. So we'll have Assad pitching game 1, Smiley game 2, and Tyone pitching game 3. And the Tigers, they're not a brutal team, but we've got to win both of these series.
Yeah, you do. Now, the Tigers, there are some things I must admit that I'm a little worried about. I don't know if you know about Spencer Torkelson, but he's been on
Yeah.
fire lately. He's looking like the top prospect everyone expected him to be.
Oh
And
yeah, wasn't he like the number 1 or number 2 prospect for a while?
yeah, he was like the first overall pick a few years ago, and I really like Spencer Torkelson, and I hope he does well, but I'm not really looking forward to him playing against the Cubs next because look at the pattern of the past few series. What has been one of the biggest patterns? If you can guess what I'm thinking about.
Poor starting pitching.
Well, it's the fact that the guy that you don't want to beat you that can beat you has beaten you.
Bobby Witt Jr.,
Pete Alonso,
Pete
Luis
Alonso.
Robert in the
Yep.
one game.
Yep. That's been the Cubs' downfall forever, though.
Which, I mean, when you're a really good player, it makes sense. It's just, do you remember in today's game when there were 2 in scoring position and 2 out and Bobby Witt was up and they pitched to him and luckily he lined out to Suzuki? Like
And
that could have,
Suzuki almost botched that one.
yeah, he did. That made my heart skip a few beats, but I mean, they were a few feet away from that really biting them in the ass again.
Yeah. I mean, you had an open base on first. I thought they were gonna. I didn't not intentionally walk him, but not give him anything to hit, and either make him swing outside the zone or take a base.
Right, like give him the old unintentional intentional walk.
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to swing at high outside or something low and chop it into the dirt, like, all right, that's fine. Let him do it. Um,
If you walk him, you walk him.
but if you walk him, yeah, you're not upset by it.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to be careful with Torkelson and don't give Javi anything to hit. Just don't.
Just pitch him high fastballs. He'll swing.
High fastballs, pitches in the dirt. Just get it done.
Nothing in the strike zone.
Yep. Yep, just no meatballs. No there was a game I think last week and if you watched it, you saw like this strikeout Baez had that was just particularly terrible. It was basically on the edge of the other side of the batter's box and he swung at it. Like just don't make any mistakes to him. Don't let him beat you. We know where the weaknesses are. We watched it for how long?
A long time. um, Man, you know, a lot of people were very upset by, um, excuse me, by the Cubs not re-signing all of the players that they had from the World Series team and trading them away or letting them go. And honestly, for the most part, it's worked out in the Cubs' favor. I mean, Chris Bryant has just, injuries
Always
just
injured.
decimated him. Ever since he got that shoulder injury, he is not the same guy.
No, like he can hit and get on, but he doesn't have that pop. But now he's hurt everywhere. Like he's on and off the IL. He's honestly become like Eloy Jimenez.
Yeah, and Javi Baez is just he's not a dude. Um, and like slash
Or
line,
yeah.
slash line 224, 264, 328.
But watch, he's gonna have a hell of a series against the Cubs.
He's got 8 home runs this year.
He'll hit 3 against the Cubs.
Yeah, Rizzo has worked out, but partly, I mean, not taking anything away from him, but he went to a really perfect spot for him.
Just unfortunate though. I assume you know about the concussion and everything. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
remember if we talked about it or not.
we
But
we
that's
did, we didn't, but yeah.
just too bad.
I mean, didn't he play with that for a while?
For like 2 months.
Yeah. Um, so, but for the most part, it's worked out in the Cubs' favor. They would have had to pay. Can you imagine them being saddled with all of those contracts?
Ugh.
And like we would be just singing a different tune.
And we wouldn't have the farm system we have now.
Yep.
Pete Crow Armstrong is doing something literally every day.
Yeah. He's making it real hard to not, call him up.
I mean, coming into today while we're recording, he was hitting over 300 in AAA. And he had an OBP of like 400 and it had an OPS of 1,000 in AAA. Like, you want to talk about a guy that made an adjustment uber quickly? That's one guy that does that.
Yeah, he's just, incredible. his 2023 stats: 290 batting average, 18 home runs, 71 RBIs, and a 910 OPS in 365 at bats. His career minor league statistics: a 305 batting average with a 908 OPS.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. And he's still
And
young.
you see the catches he's making?
Yep.
There is one thing, though. I sure as hell hope that he adjusts at Wrigley Field because you can't barrel into the wall like you can in every other ballpark at Wrigley Field.
I don't know if you remember the baseball player Kevin Mitchell.
Kevin Mitchell. I mean, that's a familiar name.
He played for the San Francisco Giants when they were good, when like Will Clark was on the team. And he couple times against the Cubs just went full barrel into the wall. And the team hired somebody to help him learn how to maneuver like when you get to the warning track, because a lot of the place he was playing, I think Candlestick at the time was like a fence, it gave or had padding. So you had give, but certain other places just did not. And they were like, they were trying to teach him like once you hit that warning track, you had to kind of, you know, give into that wall. Like you could go into it, but you had to like start going parallel to it, and then like so your force was going sideways and not straight into it. And he was just, you know, you're like, man, that dude could have killed himself running into straight brick.
Yeah, it's you can't go all Bronco Nagurski. That is ill-advised. PCA is a terrific athlete, but he's not built like Bronco Nagurski.
No, no, he's not. And he doesn't have a name like Bronco Nagurski. They give him that that extra oomph.
I mean, it's so fitting that the Chicago Bears and the NFL has a Hall of Famer named Bronco Nagurski, and that Bronco Nagurski was a massive human being that was insanely strong.
I mean, you can't be given the name Bronco Nagurski and
And be Nick
not,
Madrigal.
yeah, like that just doesn't work.
No, it does not.
Like the universe works itself out like that.
Exactly.
Um, other side of town, I don't have a ton to say about the White Sox. We talked a little bit about the Cubs series. I mean, the Cubs couldn't hit against Toussaint, and
Tuki.
Clevenger looked like, you know, Bob Gibson out there.
Yeah, he looked really good against the Cubs, and obviously the Morel home run negated that, but I mean that was one of his better games thrown as a member of the White Sox. Couldn't you kind of argue right now that Mike Clevenger is your best guy in the rotation at the moment? And listen, you sold off, I get it, but
It's funny. I have the next thing I was going to say is, how concerned are you about the way Dylan Cease is pitching?
it's a little concerning. I mean, even when he has like good outings, they're never deep.
Yeah.
They're like 5 innings. He just throws a lot of pitches.
And Kopech absolutely just forgot how to pitch against Colorado.
Yeah.
He was throwing batting practice out there.
And listen, the toughest place in the world to pitch is Colorado, but it was still dog turd taco effort out there that night. I mean, that was one where you want to get up in your puking stilts and go bleh, bleh,
Yeah, I mean,
bleh.
that like pitching line from Kopech was brutal.
Yeah, it was.
Like the only time you ever can have a line like that is you come out of that start and be like, yeah, I tore my rotator cuff, and I was like, well, our bullpen is taxed, so I need to go out there and give us 8 innings anyway. And you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Right, right. And he only had one strikeout that game, so it's not like he even like whiffed a lot. It was it was just it was bad.
Yeah, none.
The walks are an issue, and
Yeah, and that's a guy you're counting on. Like you're counting on him for next year.
yeah. So like, I mean, would you agree right now that like Mike Clevenger's your best guy?
Uh, I mean, yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a tough pill to swallow.
That's like a horse pill. That's like the size of a freaking thimble. Two
That's a
thimbles put together.
that's a horse pill rolled in broken glass. That's you're like, man, that's brutal.
You're just
And
trying to choke it down. You sound like the Marty Havlat crockpot trying to swallow the pill.
yeah,
You're
You're washing it down with Mountain Dew and crab juice.
Oh, don't eat the kalash before or after.
But man, none of those games in the Colorado series were close. Those were all just blowouts.
One way or another.
Yeah,
Because the White Sox turned what looked like another loss into a blowout looking win today with what, 7 runs in the 8th inning. So you're like, okay, well, finally they took advantage of that hitter's paradise. But, you didn't get anything from Kopech. You didn't get everything from Jesse Schultens, which, might just be a case of the Colorado Blues because Jesse Schultens has actually been pretty good overall.
yeah. And it's, as we go by every week, you're just like, man, the White Sox are just sinking deeper and deeper. They're like over 20 games out of the wild card. There's there's just zero. Like I don't know if they're mathematically eliminated yet, but they're they're essentially mathematical. I mean, they're essentially just eliminated. There's no way they can make the postseason. And it's there's still quite a bit of baseball left to be played. And I don't like I feel for the White Sox fans because how do you keep watching when you know that it's just going to get worse from here because next season's going to suck.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of this season too, I mean, we all sit here asking ourselves, why is Elvis Andrus and Yasmani Grandal still getting playing time?
Yeah, for whatever shit we could talk about the Cubs is every time we're like, why is that player getting at bats? And then just this week, why is Tucker Barnhart getting at bat? Oh, nope, he's DFA'd.
He gone.
Is they just get rid of guys and the White Sox don't because they want to extract every dollar they can from them to make it justifiable why they paid them. And I just don't get it. You gave Yasmani Grandal a lot of money. You that that contract didn't end up being worth it, but why keep playing him?
You're at the end of the contract.
Yeah.
It's over. He's going to be gone next year. You have a
He
month and a
he
half to go.
yeah, he is a pain in the ass in the locker room. Start your culture building now. Is
Yeah,
pay him to go away.
Pedro.
Yep, pay him to
We,
go away.
we're trying to figure out the culture. Blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah,
It
blah, blah.
is pay guys to go away. Is you got 2 months left. Um, and just pay him to go away. He's done. You're not bringing him back. He doesn't want to be back.
Oh, but Elvis Andrus has been playing really well lately. Who cares?
Yeah, he's not the future. And I don't hate on Elvis Andrus. I thought it was when they brought him back, I thought it was a good idea. And but don't have him, block the path of someone that's going to be playing in the future.
If you
Is
have anything in Lenyon Sosa, just let him play.
let him play. Let bring bring as many young kids as you can. Just let them play. Figure things out. Get some experience. You're done. You can't make the postseason. You're so far behind. I mean, it's it's wild how far behind they are. And let's see, they are 15 and a half games behind the Twins. So the standings in that division, the Twins are in first, who are actually above 500 at this point.
Oh, good
Guardian
for them.
Guardians are 6 games behind. The Tigers are 7.5 games behind, and the White Sox are 15 and a half behind. And that's the good news. If you look at the wild card, they're 20 and a half behind. Let's see, make sure. Oh no, they're 20. Somebody must have lost. They're 20 games out of the wild card, and they would have to leapfrog Detroit, Cleveland, Yankees, Angels, Red Sox, Toronto, and Seattle.
Leap, leap, leap. Yeah, yeah.
And they got like 40-ish games left. I just
Something like that.
Yeah, it's just no, there's no chance. So what's the point? Is I feel bad for White Sox fans because next year is going to be, they're just going to get rid of everything they can. They're going to pare that payroll back and they're going to try to rebuild the farm system, and you're in for a tough ride. And I feel for you because you're now seeing, already had a tough season. You've already had a tough few years. You got a tough season, and they're they do, publicly they can't even admit that a major overhaul needs to be done on this team. That's how bad it is that they can't even admit that. That just
No, and they
seems
won't
like
admit it.
that just seems like, step one. Mitch, you have a problem.
If you're a White Sox fan, though, don't you kind of want to just absolutely bottom out here? So maybe if you lose 100+ games, that might be more of an incentive for major change. Isn't that your best bet at this point? Because if you win a bunch of meaningless games and you go from like an awful record to just like a bad, not the worst record, isn't that kind of sadly enough for Jerry to be like, yeah, we can fix this. We're keeping everyone here. It's fine.
I mean, if let's just say you go on a losing streak and you end up losing 100 games, do you think that matters to Jerry?
Probably not, but there is a more chance that it will than if you had like a mediocre record.
I mean, they're not going to have a mediocre. They're on pace now to have 98 losses.
No, I know. I'm just saying hypothetically.
I mean, they will spin anything. If Major League Baseball went, you know what, we want to incentivize fun, and we're going to give a wild card spot to a random team based on a lottery drawing, and the White Sox won with 98 losses and went to the postseason because of absolute luck draw in a lottery, Jerry would hang his hat on that.
Of course.
So I don't expect major changes. You're guaranteed Pedro Grifol is going to be your manager. Period.
You know what I see happening? Honestly, I see them rearranging a few things. And it's going to be like, well, we moved this guy to this department. We moved Rick Hahn to this department. We've taken accountability and we've made some major changes, when it's just rearranging some deck chairs on the Titanic. That's what I see happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think technically Tony La Russa is still on the dole. And
yeah, I think this was the last year of his contract, I believe.
Oh, was it? Okay. So you're off of that one. But Jerry doesn't like to pay two managers.
Unless it's Tony La Russa because he loves him.
Yeah, so you're not paying Pedro Grifol and then somebody else too. And I think your best bet is somebody deciding to step away, not actually firing him. If Rick Hahn's like, you know what, I've had enough of this abuse. I'm going to take a year off and figure things out. But because that guy, I don't know if we talked about it or not, but the fact that he went after fans on Twitter.
Oh, the whole cesspool thing.
Move.
Yeah. It's like,
that's. I mean, sure, Twitter is a cesspool, but
he's not wrong. But you shouldn't say it.
Is Twitter is a cesspool, but you have a whole lot of fans on Twitter that are passionate fans that deserve a whole lot better an acknowledgement from you.
Thus why you shouldn't say it, because it sounds like you're generalizing.
Yeah. If he would have said that, hey, there's a big segment of Twitter that's a cesspool, everybody been like, oh yeah, I know exactly which account you're talking about.
But the way you said it, it made it sounded like you were insulting the whole fan base, which
Yeah.
can't do that, bud.
You can't. They're gonna come for his hide, man. And I'm right there behind him cheering him on. You can do it. Rip his head off.
You know what I see happening tomorrow? The reporters are going to talk to Rick Hahn. He's going to have his coffee in his hand with that droopy Rick Hahn look. So yesterday, I went home and there was a bunch of vomit all over my front lawn. I don't know exactly who did it, but we're going to do our due diligence and find out who did do it. Because I feel that it's not really fair for me or anyone in the White Sox organization to have puke all over their front lawn. And I'm going to be thinking the whole time, Sean, how did you have time to go out to Rick Hahn's place and then come back for this show? There is a source from one of my neighbors that it was some guy on giant stilts. We cannot confirm that fully until we do a complete investigation.
And my neighbor said he was carrying what he believed was a crock pot.
The crock pot was also making distinct noises of regurgitation.
But yeah, Rick Hahn he's just digging himself in a hole, and I don't know, he just looks like he's over it, but I don't see major changes coming.
Whenever you hear about major changes, the reaction is always the same. Like, yeah, right. We'll see it when we believe it.
I know I've read that some believe that the White Sox farm system after this trade deadline has really been bolstered. I'm gonna wait and see on that. I'm not gonna make judgments either way.
It seems like it went from a bad system to an okay system from what I read.
I saw somebody ranked him as a top 3.
What? Who? No way.
I'm gonna have to Google it. I'm like, what?
I'm not trying to shit on the White Sox fans who are listening here. That MLB Pipeline would highly disagree with that.
Yeah, it wasn't ESPN or MLB Pipelines. I don't remember who it was. I'll have to Google.
Now, was it like most improved? Because if you're talking about just like how they've improved, then yeah, it is a big jump.
Yeah, no, they were talking about overall. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna wait and see on that.
Right.
On
right.
how they look. But they still need talent, and they're gonna have to have waves. They can't just have like, oh, hey, we have all these good players that are going to come up either in 2024 or 2025 and then a barren wasteland again. Is they have to figure out how to bring players up and bolster them with free agency and maintain your farm system.
Yeah, you need to keep churning it because when they built the last core, from 2017 to 2020, they had like the best farm system in baseball, but that's because all the talent was at the top. So once the top graduated, then you didn't really have much left.
Yep. And that's the thing is when you're in rankings, your farm system, when you graduate dudes, should take a dip, but it shouldn't shit the bed. It shouldn't just go from great to terrible overnight once you bring guys up. That's not a winning recipe for a long-term success. And for whatever flaws we call Jed out for, he's clearly been making that into a priority, because you look at the way that the Cubs farm system is. You've got guys that are ready to come anytime, and then guys that are still several years away.
It's the depth you want.
Yep. But that's That's a tough one to come for the White Sox. And I agree with you that, they should be DFAing dudes and just, going to battle with the young players and players that they they think have a chance to play there next year, and uh, see who wants to still play competitive baseball even when it's the the season's pretty much over.
Right.
It tells you a lot about a player when they're still playing hard and you're 20 games out with 40 games left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's one Blackhawks topic I want to talk about, and I'm sure you know what that is. Um, Jonathan Taves uh, is not retiring, but he's also not going to play this year. I I don't understand what his expectation is. Does he feel like he takes another year off and goes deeper into his 30s, that suddenly he's going to be magically better and teams are going to want him and he's going to come back and have this comeback tour?
I would be shocked if Jonathan Toews played in the NHL again. Could he maybe take a year off and play overseas? I could see that, but I can't see him playing in the NHL again.
I just don't understand. Like, he's got money and,
Nothing
like,
left to prove.
yeah, nothing left to prove. He's got 3 Stanley Cups and a bunch of money. Like, just enjoy the rest of your life. I don't understand. Um, and you've had a really good career. Just announce your retirement and and accept all the accolades that people are going to heap on you, and go out with your head held high. Like, right now, it's by saying, well, I'm not going to retire just yet. All it is people going, what the fuck, dude? And you're gaining nothing from this.
Yeah, and it's obviously emotional when he says goodbye to you and everything, but yeah, like I said, I would be flabbergasted if he ever played in the NHL again. I don't see it. And, especially for a guy who's physically gone, he had the long-term COVID, he's had the concussions, he's got the autoimmune compromise. There's a lot going on here. And just getting back on the ice after that, that's gonna be real tough.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, I think it makes more sense for him to retire, and then if he suddenly felt better in a year, unretire and come back, and at this, like, retire though, get your accolades, and then go off into the sunset without the microscope on you. Just people like, oh, he's done.
Right.
Just don't understand.
I don't either, but I guess we'll see what happens.
But the thing I've been the most excited to talk about is we had the Bears joint practice with the Indianapolis Colts and the second preseason game. Um, in a kind of a surprise move, Coach Flus said, "Hey, guys that we got a good look at this week, we're not going to play them this week or at this game." And they didn't. They didn't play a good chunk of their starters.
Yeah, Justin Fields didn't play. DJ Moore didn't play. I know
Claypool didn't play.
Claypool's, well, he's kind of banged up right now.
A lot of these guys are, quote, banged up, and I don't know how much I believe. Um, but I mean, we have Nate Davis, who's, not willing to talk about any injury, which makes me think that maybe he's not injured and they're just telling him he can't practice. I don't know what's going on. It seems like a lot of subterfuge to me, but because they're being weird about it. Like, what about these injuries? Everybody's fine. Just mild. Everything's good. but they're not letting guys practice. They're not letting guys play. I don't know what to think, but regardless, Claypool didn't play. Mooney didn't play. And most of I think their whole starting offensive line didn't play. Fields didn't play. Their starting defensive line didn't play. Their starting safeties didn't play. The only starter that I can think of that played was Tyreek Stevenson, and that's because he's in a battle for that starting spot
Mm-hmm.
with Terrell Smith. So it was all backups the whole game.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot to take away, but there is one thing that I do kind of want to have a serious conversation about.
Hopefully it rhymes with Myson Agent
Yes, it does.
because that dude can play football.
That's an NFL arm. I know I'm not looking at basically the numbers because it's a preseason game, but if you just watch him throw, that looks like an NFL arm.
He does. He looks like an NFL player. And it's wild to think you're like, well, he was why didn't he get drafted? Well, he was Division 2. And I'm like, Trey Lance got drafted in the top, what, 3?
Mm-hmm.
And what's his name that the Eagles drafted from the same college was number 2. Um, God, what's his name? Went to the Washington football team.
Carson Wentz?
Carson Wentz. He was a number over 2 overall pick from a Division 2 school. Like it, and I want to say it was Greg Gabriel that tweeted out something along the lines of that Tyson Bagent had more passing yards in his college career than like CJ Stroud, and like all the other top quarterbacks combined.
The numbers are ridiculous. His college numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah, it's insane. And when you look, like he makes every throw. Like there's not like I don't how did this guy not get drafted?
And he
Like,
was poised in the pocket. He was calm in there.
yeah, he looks calm, and I was like, okay, maybe there's like poor athleticism in there. No, I mean, is he Justin Fields? Oh, no, but he's also not Peyton Manning back there either. Like he's very young Aaron Rodgers-ish with his athleticism, sneaky with it. And like if you give him a space, he'll run for 20 yards.
He ran for the touchdown. That
Yeah.
was a 92-yard drive in which you saw a nice combination of, screen passes, passes in tight windows, and then he ran for the touchdown. I mean, those throws had some zip on them. So, Sean, here's the thing. PJ Walker looks terrible. Like legit terrible. And I know you signed him to a 2-year deal to be a backup. And as long as Justin Fields is healthy, PJ Walker is whatever as a backup. But I'm not saying the funny thing like, oh, Tyler Bagent should be QB1, bench that Fields. No. I'm not even saying QB2, but don't you have to consider QB3?
Yeah, here's is PJ Walker has looked terrible. But I'm going to say this is PJ Walker has been in the league for several years. He played at a high level in the XFL, or was it XFL or USFL? One of them he played at a very high level, and you brought him in, and he's much closer to the style of play as Justin Fields, and that's kind of what you want is a backup quarterback that you can put in without having to completely change your offensive play calling. And he's not nearly as good as Justin Fields, but he's a similar style. And you're like, okay, well, we can go with that. And he also has, who's worked with DJ Moore, their number one wide receiver.
And that's all fine. And I'm not saying
And
you have to
that's,
get rid of PJ
yeah,
Walker, but
but your other option at quarterback is I think you were probably keeping three. I think the cautionary tale of the San Francisco 49ers and the rule change that came about that is like you probably are keeping three wide receiver or three quarterbacks.
mhm.
And your other option is Nathan Peterman. And Nathan Peterman has played fine this preseason. This has nothing to do with Nathan Peterman. This has to do with Tyson Bagent. And Nathan Peterman has been in this league for, played 2 years in Buffalo, 2 years in Vegas, and this is his second year in Chicago. This is his sixth year, and he's like third, almost, was he like 30 years old almost?
And we know he's not good.
Yet we know who he is. We know who he is, and it's not a knock on him. I personally would move on from him. Let him try to latch on with another team, give him more opportunity, and uh and let Tyson Bagent have that opportunity to let him play, because you did him a disservice. Nathan Peterman got to play a lot of football in that game against Indianapolis when that should have been Tyson Bagent going, yeah, this is the Tyson Bagent game.
Yeah. I mean, like, because, okay, you want to make the argument for PJ Walker being on the team. Fine. Fine. And, Nathan Peterman didn't look shabby at all in that preseason game. But again, we know who Nathan Peterman is. And I think it would be a disservice if we dismiss the potential young talent in favor of somebody is just going to be a third string quarterback on any NFL team.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the performance Nathan Peterman has put in. And I know John Gruden thinks very highly of him. And but this is a guy that we know his ceiling. He's almost 30 years old. Let him just go. And I don't even care about the argument of who should be the second string quarterback. You should keep three,
Right.
because if you try to put Tyson Bagent with the way he has played on a practice squad, somebody is going to take him.
Exactly. You don't want to risk that. So
Is put him on the 53, and you can figure it out in practices and whatever else of who is your backup quarterback. But all three, Tyson Bagent should be on this 53-man roster.
I agree. I just you're really not gaining anything by having Nathan Peterman on the roster at this point. And I'm sure he's a great teammate and a veteran to have around, but
yeah, I'm not shitting on him. I'm doing this as a favor. Is I think you have to keep Bagent. That means you're not keeping Peterman unless you're planning to keep a fourth quarterback as a practice squad quarterback.
maybe
If that's your plan, then okay. But otherwise, I would say let him go and let him try to latch on with somebody else.
right, because the chances are PJ Walker is not just going to be jettisoned after signing it. I know it's not a lot of money, but it would be surprising to me if they just right away ate PJ Walker's contract.
Yeah, I mean, we're shitting on him because 2 preseason games he hasn't looked good, but he's learning a brand new offense, and we got to cut him some slack. I know Bagent's learning the same new offense, but you know, we've seen PJ Walker have success in the NFL in a short stint, but we've seen him have the success. So, let's give a longer sample size before we make a final decision. But I think Tyson Bagent has done plenty to warrant being on this 53-man roster, because if you let him go and he plays, continues this growth and he ends up being a really good quarterback and you just let him go for nothing,
Hmm.
that just looks stupid.
Exactly. And listen, who the hell knows what Tyson Bagent's ever going to be in the NFL? We don't know. It
Nope.
could be nothing, but it's a matter of hanging on to a guy that might have a ceiling versus a guy that we know where the ceiling is. And I think that best case scenario right now is Fields 1, Walker 2, Bagent 3. That's the way I'd put it together.
Yeah, because I'm going to give you a cautionary tale of a young quarterback that was unheralded and came in to a season and played well and wound up getting a big contract afterwards, Mike Glennon. And, so maybe Bagent is not a real NFL quarterback, and this is all, he had played
Preseason fluff.
yeah, he was a preseason fluke, and you're like, oh well, against vanilla defenses and backup players, he's playing well, but against real defenses and starting caliber players, he's not gonna evolve to anything. Who knows? Maybe that's the case.
But what have you got to
But
lose at this point? Like I said, you know who Nathan Peterman is,
yeah,
and now you can find out if Tyson Bagent has any value as a backup quarterback.
yeah. If you don't feel he's capable, then you go, oh well, PJ Walker then is just are still number two. But I mean, you know, like if I just think he's shown he has the pedigree. And I remember Greg Gabriel did post this. He said that when he was still scouting, one of the main things they looked for with quarterbacks was uh their college play, regardless of the level, their college play and the over a career and how they progressed and how many snaps they had. They wanted to see the more snaps they had, the more throws they made, the the better that they project, or you're able to project them in the NFL because you have a bigger body of work. And Tyson Bagent has a big body of work. And who cares that it's against lesser competition? He played with lesser talent as well, and he looked good. So now that he comes in and with the NFL and he's being very humble and he's just performing, just makes you go, okay, maybe we have something here. And I know the Bears paid him like a lot more than other undrafted free agents to come here.
So maybe that tells you right there that they value him as it is.
Yeah, I think they value him, and I think he's exceeding expectations. I think they were hoping to practice squad him, and I think he's forced that issue. Barring either just bottoming out in game 3 or an injury, I I think he's forced the issue that he's QB3 at least.
Sure.
Let's see, what else do I have? The Bears offense, they have really worked hard and are starting to produce with screen passes.
Isn't it a wonderful sight? Isn't it a really nice change of pace for once?
Yeah, it's time and place for everything. Is the Bears couldn't do it previously. They've worked at it, and you're seeing success. You're seeing it executed well, and uh, and yards in the air per pass. Like those people, I don't give a shit, because in the NFL, you need to be able to throw a screen pass to play winning football. Period.
Yak. Yak, yak, yak.
Yeah, yak is more important than yards in the air.
For only Justin Fields. Nobody gave a shit until Justin Fields threw a couple of screen passes.
Yeah, I am the king of screaming that Patrick Mahomes is the king of yak. But you know what? You're not going to ever hear me disrespect him as a quarterback because he's the best quarterback in the NFL, even though he's the king of getting yak.
But you know what? Even when you are the king of getting yak, Patrick Mahomes has the intelligence to be able to know how to execute that, because it's a lot harder to execute those screens than you think, because obviously everyone's got to be in sync. But how often do you see a guy like Pat Mahomes, when the pressure comes, he knows exactly how and where to get that ball out? That is not as easy as it looks.
Yep. And you've got to, a lot of times you're throwing that at a weird angle. You're throwing it high, you're throwing it low because a defender's right there. And
He's flawless every time he executes it.
and also, just because the player is getting the yards and you're getting the credit, you have to be able to get them the ball in a position that they allows the player to get those yards. If you throw it behind and they have to stop and change direction to make the catch, they're not going to get as many yards after the catch because they've stopped their momentum. But if you throw a ball, it hits them in stride, and you have the potential to help them gain more yards. There's a lot of quarterback component to it. So yeah, I don't take anything away from Patrick Mahomes because he's helping create that yak, but he also throws a lot of short passes that go for long distances. And that's how guys pad their stats.
The better you execute, the more you yak.
Yeah, if you think that Tom Brady threw for 5,000 yards or 4,500 yards with no screen passes, I've got something to tell you. Is for many of those years, the Patriots had little running game, and they used those short passes as in lieu of the running game. And he got all of those yards put on his stats, and it didn't take away from him being, a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Right.
Let's see. Let's see. The special teams play was excellent. You had
I think the return game could have been a little better, but
okay.
they
I
didn't.
mean the coverage, the special teams
The,
coverage.
the coverage,
Yeah.
yes, was very, very good.
Yeah.
And the
I know.
kicking, Caro Santos hit a 50-yarder.
Yeah, but everybody's like, "Oh, Velus Jones sucks at punt return." What is Dante Pettis doing? That's so amazing.
Well, he doesn't turn the ball over, but like he was taking the ball out to like the 18. Like there wasn't really much speed or elusiveness. It was just kind of, he wasn't really able to get around anybody.
Who was the kick returner before the Bears brought in Cordero Patterson? Who was the kick returner the year before?
Wasn't that Tariq Cohen?
No, he was the punt returner. Who was the kickoff
He was
guy?
punt returner.
I can't remember.
Was
It was
it?
dude sucked, and we were just like, but they had him back there because he was sure-handed and didn't make any mistakes, but he also wasn't returning anything. And you're like, Jesus, this is. We had Devin Hester, now we've got this garbage, and then we got Cordero Patterson, and it was like, oh, thank God, we can return a kick again.
This is bothering me. I'm gonna look it up because I remember Tariq Cohen returning punts, but
Yeah,
kick returns. Was it? Did Anthony Miller get any of that? Let's see. Returning. I know. Benny Cunningham was technically.
Bandy Cunningham. I think it was Benny Cunningham.
He was on the list of returners, and yes, he was a returner. You had Benny Cunningham, Taquan Mizell, and Anthony Miller. It was like a hodgepodge.
Anthony Miller was hurt, and Taquan Mizell was like he didn't play much, so it was mostly Benny Cunningham, and he was just like, oh well, he didn't mess up, like he didn't do anything good, he just didn't make a mistake, and it was so infuriating. And then we're like, thank God we got Cordero Patterson, who's an actual returner. And I feel like we're gonna get into that zone if we keep Dante Pettis on this team solely for the purpose of returning punts. Because like he may have been great at it in college, but he he's not giving us anything here just because he didn't fumble. Um, but on the coverage, the kick coverage and punt coverage, I think they played really well, and that's good. And you've got a lot of guys that you brought in that are good special teams players, even if they're not starting caliber players for your position. So, um, we're going to lose some of those guys when the cuts. I just hope we're still able to maintain good kick coverage, even if we lose some of those guys in the cut down day.
Right.
Um, you had again good play. Terrell Lewis looked good. Um, Travis Gibson looked good again. Um, but one thing I do want to call out: the Bears' backup offensive lineman looked good. Doug Kramer has played well. Ja'Tyre Carter has played well. Alex Leatherwood playing left guard has played well, and Larry Borum played really well this week.
Yeah, it's nice to see.
Uh,
Jair Carter's an interesting one, I think.
I think he's going to be important because Tevin Jenkins has a history of injuries, and Nate Davis we don't know what's going on with him. You feel like Tyre Carter is going to get put into duty at some point, and he was a guy that they were high on after they drafted him last year, but he had a lot of growing to do. He had to get stronger. He had to get a better center of gravity and some better technique. And he worked out with Braxton Jones with Olin Kreutz. He was the other guy that worked out with him this offseason. And it seems like things are paying off for him in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
And Doug Kramer's a guy I like a lot. And we lost him to injury last year. And I kept saying to people that were like, the Bears didn't do anything to address the center position. And I was like, well, yeah, they did. They moved Whitehair over. Lucas Patrick, in theory, is going to be healthy. And you have Doug Kramer, who was basically redshirt last year because he got injured during training camp, who's coming back. And Lucas Patrick is again injured. And he's a guy, I'm going to say, why don't they part ways with him?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I have a feeling he's not going to make this team. But Doug Kramer has 2 for 2 good games. Both games, he had his Pro Football Focus grade was good, and what you watched on film was good. And
I think they see him as the guy for the future. I really do.
I don't. I mean, I think that's probably the hope because then he's on the team already. Um,
You
but
just hear about how much they like him. I think they're very high on him.
I was listening to the Windy City Gridiron podcast, and they were kind of ribbing on people that are Doug Kramer stands, and I'm like I'm not like a stan because I'm not blindly following him. I liked him coming out of Illinois, and I was bummed when he got injured, and when he came back, I was like I'm excited to see what he can do, and he's performed well, especially considering that Lucas Patrick's not in there, and now Whitey Coathair has a injured hand. So I think next week you're going to see him probably start again. And I'm going to guess he's probably going to play between him and Dieter Iserlin. They're probably going to play the whole game at the center position. And
Mm-hmm.
and who are you gonna pick to be on your squad? I mean, Whitey Coathair's if he's healthy, is going to be the starting center.
Right.
That's a given. But you're going to have a backup center, and who are you going to pick? A guy that spent all last year injured and has come in this year and hasn't played because he's been injured, or a guy who has played really well in, all of the preseason games and that your regime drafted, and you save $5 million in cap space by cutting the other guy. Like it seems like a no-brainer that you're going to keep Doug Kramer and not Lucas Patrick.
Right.
But Leatherwood, this seems like they're justified in when they picked him up and paid the rest of his rookie deal, which was
Mm-hmm.
a couple $1 million. He seems to have found his spot at guard, and he's played well. And if you have two guards that are on rookie deals, that actually you'll have three guards playing on rookie deals. Three of your four guards are playing on rookie deals, and they're playing good football. That's a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Larry Borum playing well is a good sign, because I was worried that their swing tackle wasn't on this roster and that they were going to try to have to trade or pick up somebody off the waiver wires, to be that swing tackle. But Larry Borum has been playing pretty well. And if he wins that job, that's good for the Bears.
I agree.
Let's see, what other notes do I have? Gervon Dexter has gotten most of the publicity as the Bears' new drafted defensive tackles, and he's played well. But Pickens, the other drafted defensive tackle, has been playing great.
Mm-hmm. He's been very noticeable this preseason.
Yeah, he has just been a ball of energy, and I love seeing it. I love watching those two getting time together to play next to each other, because that's the future of the Bears defensive line right there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What else do I have here? We don't know Bears injury status on anything until week 1. So we are all just playing guessing games. And we'll see if the Bears play any starters in game 3.
I would
Preseason
kind of
game
hope
3.
so.
We've got Buffalo this week on a Saturday,
Bills
and
fan puke cometh.
and I think that's a good game, because that's a team that a lot of people have as their AFC, one of their contenders to go to the Super Bowl. And it's a game where, sure, they're quote unquote meaningless, but it's a measuring stick to see what you look like against those players.
Right, absolutely. Yep.
We saw this week where you had the joint practices against the Colts, and you saw the Bears. They played like everything meant something to them. Everything got chippy, and there was there was no filming at that point, but there was a play that I read about where Tyreek Stevenson was on special teams against the Indianapolis Colts gunner, and he chucked that dude like 5 yards and laid him out. So he couldn't make a play. And I love seeing it. I love seeing the physicality. And I love joint practices, because that gives you a different perspective than playing against your own teammates.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of like a situation where you can say it might not be played at the full intensity of a game, but it's certainly bigger than just playing scrimmages against your own team. And, you obviously did a little bit of everything. You did one-on-ones, you did a bunch of drills, and then you kind of, played some simulations. But I mean, that's the nice thing that I like about these joint practices, because kind of to your point, it feels more like a preseason game when you're able to do this sort of thing.
And I'm going to tell you something that's nobody's told me this is a fact, but I'm willing to put money on it, is so when teams can't film practices unless it's their practice.
Right.
So when the Colts and the Bears have a joint practice, both teams are recording it, but the rest of the league doesn't get to see that. So they're able to do a lot of the things that they would do in a regular season game that they wouldn't do in a preseason game, because a preseason game, everybody gets the film on that. So they're trying not to give anything away. They're going to do some of those things in those scrimmages with the Colts because the other teams don't have access to that film. So they're going to try some you know plays out in situations. They're going to try to run a real defense that they would, not a vanilla defense. They're going to try to fool players. They're going to do certain things that they don't do in the preseason games because they don't want it on film at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as much as it's been fun to have football and being able to watch, some of these newer guys, I am ready for the regular season to start.
I think a lot of people are. How do you feel?
About the season?
Yeah.
I'm excited. I think the way the season is lined up is good. So the Packers, right off the bat, you have an opportunity to make your most hated rival start off the season with a loss and being last in the division. You've got game 2 is against the Buccaneers, who quite possibly could be the worst team in the NFL.
They could be. They could be.
That quarterback battle is not good.
No.
And then game 3 is, I don't expect them to win that, but it's a good measuring stick to see where you are. So let's say you beat the Packers and you beat the Buccaneers and you start 2-0. Is a lot of teams are going to be 2-0. Is what you don't like. What I hate to see is when you're a team that's unproven, like the Bears. Like, let's say that they're good this year and they start off with a good record, and at some point, every analyst and every show is going to be like, "Are the Bears for real? Are the Bears for real? This team for real? Are they for real or are they fake? They blah blah blah." And you get to answer that right off the bat. Is they play the Chiefs week 3. Is you don't need to win that game to prove who you are. You just, you can watch that game, and if you play them tough and they have to do everything they can to eke out a win against you, that's one of those ones you chalk up to a moral victory. You're like, hey, like that's a team that just won the Super Bowl and is expected to go to the Super Bowl again, and we played them down to the wire, and that's where we are, and we're not done growing yet. The Broncos, I know Sean Payton is a fantastic coach. I think it's going to take more than a few weeks for him to turn this whole roster around. And I think his comments about the previous head coach are his way of saying, like, hey, this is why if I suck, it's because the last guy sucked so bad, it takes me a while to build up. So I think he might be feeling like he's not in their final form yet. And then you've got the Commanders, who I think that's a very winnable game. So yeah, the early part of the season, fingers crossed, I'm feeling pretty good, but who knows? Everything could just go south. You have no idea. It's the NFL.
Yeah. About week 1 against the Packers, there's a lot of optimism from this fan base against that team. I'm not so sure.
Think about the words I said. you have the opportunity to make your most hated rival
Yes,
start
you do.
0-1 and make them last place in the division to start off the bat. You have the opportunity. You definitely have that opportunity. This is not the same team as the last several years. There is big changes on this team. But yeah, but the thing is until you beat the Packers, you know, they own you. They own you until you beat them.
I don't like how good Jordan Love has looked this preseason.
It's preseason. You know who else has looked awesome in preseason? Mitchell Trubisky.
I guess.
So a lot of guys have looked awesome in preseason, and they just look. I mean, Nathan Peterman has looked pretty good in preseason, and we know he sucks. So I'm not going to anoint Jordan Love because there's been so much smoke about him being a bad quarterback that it can't all be made up. And maybe he started to figure it out, but I've seen some real bad throws from him. And these are against vanilla defenses. Even if he's good, even if he's mediocre to good, he's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, where he's historically great at not throwing interceptions. Aaron Rodgers is historically great at how good he's been at not throwing interceptions.
Absolutely. There is no question about it.
Even if Jordan Love is good, he is not going to be historically good at not throwing interceptions. And the Bears are going to not let him beat them with deep throws. He's going to have to dink and dunk everything. And at some point, new quarterbacks make mistakes when you make them march down the field. That's what they do. And, he may be good. He may beat the Bears. I think, though, that the Bears are going to be able to intercept him and cause him to make mistakes. And at least enough for Packer fans to go, this sucks. This is not Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, I think I've said my piece.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, etc. Share this podcast with your friends. That's how we grow the show. Follow us on social media at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com, or ShyFanPat2 for Alex on Twitter/X, or AlexanderJPatCreative.com for all the cool stuff that Alex does. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van, and she looks like...
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down, I wanna...